I just turned the meta ad library into an automated sales machine with n8n, Gemini, and Gamma. I'm going to show you exactly how you can too. If you're selling any kind of ad creative services like UGC, performance creative, or doing paid social management, you know that the free audit is what closes deals. So you go pull their ads from their Meta Ads account, you put together a deck showing what's currently broken, and then you pitch your solution. This works, but it takes forever. So I built an automation that does all of it. You plug in the brand name, n8n scrapes their ads, and then Gemini audits them, and finally Gamma goes out and builds a deck with all that context. All this happens in just a few minutes. If you stick around to the end of this video, I'm going to give you the full n8n system, all the prompts I used, and everything that you need to implement this for your business. All right, let's jump in. First thing I want to do here is jump into a demo of this automation so you can see how it looks end to end. I'm going to click on execute workflow, and we're going to go ahead and plug in some details for my very own brand, CoinLedger, which is a crypto tax software. So we can see coming from our website, we describe our URL here, and then the other input we need is going to be a link to the Meta Ads library to show all of the ads we're currently running and that are active. So I just plugged in CoinLedger up here. I filtered by active ads, and that's going to be the URL we want to plug into the system to get our audit and analysis completed. So we got the URL in here. We got our Meta Ads library URL here, and I'm going to go ahead and submit that to kick things off. So if I come back to n8n, we should see this running now, and it's really split up into two separate phases. Phase one here on the top row is going to be all the context building we have to do to get this automation put together. So we're going to scrape the website. We're going to scrape the Meta Ads library to see everything that needs to get pulled in for a real ad creative audit. And after that's done, we're then going to run it through this bottom section here, which is going to perform the audit using Gemini 3.1 Pro, because that can take in both images and videos, which are what we have running on our ad account. And finally, once we have that audit completed, we're going to take all of that context and pass that off to the Gamma API. If you're not familiar, Gamma is a AI presentation maker, which makes it really cool just to send a bunch of text off to their API, and it's going to come back to us with a presentation. So here's one of their demo ones, so we can see this is some of the output you can get out of Gamma just by passing off text, images, or any other context that is relevant. So very, very useful if you're running a sales process here in bulk and really need to scale out the number of presentations you're making. That way you can reduce the time it takes to go from, an initial call or kind of finding an initial lead to actually sending them this sales pitch. So we can see that this top row just finished up here. We got all of that data processing complete. And now we're actually passing off all of that information here to the Gemini API. So it's analyzing our full ad account with all of these images and videos, and it's going to come back to us with that audit report of what's going well, what needs to be improved, and any other suggestions that tie into our sales pitch. So I'll pause it here and come back when that's complete. All right, so that analysis just finished up, and then we've moved on here, which are going to be the two nodes that actually take that audit report and pass it off to the Gamma API. So if I pull this up here and we see this prompt set up, we have a whole bunch of context pulled from the CoinLedger website, as well as kind of the process that we want to go through to create this slide deck. And so this is a pretty basic one set up for sake of demonstration, but this is going to be the spot where you jump in and detail your own sales deck layout, how you pitch your clients, and what is important context that needs to be included for however you approach your sales process. So this is not 100% ready just to start sending out. Make sure you're including your unique process here if you're wanting to run a system like this. So that's what gets set off here into the prompt, going to the Gamma API, along with all of our ad image URLs and video URLs, so that context can also get included. We're going to loop here and wait until that presentation finishes generating, because that can take a little bit of time depending on the text content size or what all you're including. But we can see that it just finished up. So I'll pull up this URL, copy it here, and let's take a look at that presentation that was just generated for us. So here we go. CoinLedger, we pulled the image from our site, so we're getting our branding information down, which is good. And so it's the creative strategy and scaling roadmap. So if we scroll through here, we can see it's giving a breakdown of our current creative mix and analysis. So what's working, what's missing, creative fatigue, kind of showcasing this confused guy problem. Basically, we're running too many or we've been running this confused guy ad for too long. And so people may have fatigue over seeing this ad, and it may not be giving us as high of a ROAS as we possibly could get if we mixed up this creative a little bit further. That suggestion makes sense to me. Let's keep going. So we can see that it's flagging one of our winners here. So like one of this CoinLedger street interviews, which looks to be this one right here, where we have a person getting interviewed in a video. That's a very popular format right now that's doing well for us, which is good. The the audit is matching up to what we see in reality. And then we're honestly just giving more context here. So kind of giving messaging suggestions based off of what we're pushing out on ads versus kind of what we share on our homepage. So it looks like there's some angles we could lean in further to. And then it breaks down a couple of different priority action items. So it looks like it's suggesting kind of leaning into some of our features a bit more, using some UGC ads, which is super interesting, and kind of breaking down any further sales angles or pitches or anything else we need here to go out and sell this to a client. So in this case, where CoinLedger is the client. Once again, do want to reiterate that if you're running this for real, you should set this up following your own current sales process. I've used a prompt that kind of gives like a generic outline showcasing the art of the possible. But in order to be really effective with this, you do need to put in the work to customize this prompt here when you build the Gamma prompt and when you run your Gemini audit to actually follow what you would do if you're doing it manually. So it does take some time, but it will be worth it to put some investment into that. So that covers it here for the demo. Really quick, jumping back to the sales deck, I wanted to call out point number 3 here, which is sourcing UGC style videos from crypto native creators. This is super interesting because it aligns it with exactly what David, myself, and the rest of the team here have been hard at work building the last couple of months. And that's our AI ad platform called Calico AI. So at a high level, Calico is this ad platform using all the latest generative AI models that allows you to create AI ads at scale. So what we have featured here is kind of a collection of the UGC style videos we've actually created all within Calico. And so you can see we can have, consistent characters. We can set up street interview style videos, or even some more of the traditional UGC style videos that allow you to actually insert your product and have the avatar hold them in their hand. And so definitely want to have a brief call out here for you guys to go check it out if you're running any kind of ad creative. We're pretty new, but there's a lot more features coming in the future, but we've been hard at work focusing on UGC. So just to give a brief call out, here's kind of an overview of how the system is set up. You can create UGC ads, you can create B-roll or other video that features your product, or you can even create on-brand static ads and static images. Scrolling down here, we got this huge library of all these AI avatars that allow you to create consistent characters in your UGC videos. And so you can go beyond, like the 8-second limit, the 10-second limit, into a full-fledged ad that actually has the same avatar delivering your script and featuring your product. And then we just have a showcase here for some more of the ads. So we're early on, but highly encourage you guys to go check this out. I think you're going to be impressed with the realism and the power of this, even in its current state. All right, coming back to n8n, let's go through the node by node walkthrough so you can build and implement this exact system for your ad creative agency or for automating your own sales process. Like I mentioned in the demo, the first entry point into this is going to be our form trigger. So this is going to take in our brand website URL so we can go out and scrape that brand context, and it's going to take in a URL for the meta ads library. Once again, if you need to find it, all you got to do is search for the CoinLedger or your brand name, and then filter by active ads on this dropdown. That's going to be what we're expecting to ingest into the system and pull out all of the ad creative for. Pretty simple there. Next are going to be our 2 scraping nodes we need to run to actually get this context. I'm going to be using the Firecrawl API to go ahead and scrape all of the brand details because they have this format here called branding, which is really useful for extracting all the key characteristics like a brand's font, their colors, their images used on the website, all things of that nature that kind of define how a brand presents themselves online. So we can see on the right hand side here, we have all of this information now at our fingertips that we can pass off to Gemini and Gamma when it comes time to audit and build our presentation. Important things are, color scheme, all the images for like the logo icon and the OG image, which is like the main preview image on the website, and all sorts of other helpful context we just want to give to an AI model. The other thing we're going to do here, if I pull this up, when we call into the Firecrawl scrape endpoint, is going to be passing off our markdown format here because we want to get some of the text content back about the brand and what their homepage is and what they're actually about. So that can include, like how they position themselves, what are their products they offer, things of that nature. I found was helpful when building out these presentations, and kind of going through this context engineering, context bundling process really just makes your results much better. And so this was pretty easy to set up. I'm making an HTTP request here to the Firecrawl v2 scrape endpoint. And so if you're not familiar, if you search for, Firecrawl scrape, Firecrawl is a tool that allows you to get information from any URL on the internet, and it returns LLM friendly data. So we're going to go from a URL to this markdown content that displays all of the text here in a really useful format for the AI models to process and come back with something useful. So big fan of Firecrawl. Do recommend you use it for your scraping. I'm using a predefined credential type here since I've already set up the Firecrawl API. But if you haven't done this before, also very easy. You just want to go to firecrawl.dev, go ahead and go to your dashboard, and then you're going to be able to grab your API key here and set up an header authentication for working with the Firecrawl API. Very easy. Be sure to check out some of our other videos if you want to see the full step-by-step setup process. But I don't want to go through that right now, so we can continue moving forward. So we're going to post to the scrape endpoint. We're going to use this credential, and then we do need to send this JSON body here, which includes those two details from before. It's going to be the URL we entered from our form trigger, and then we're going to ask for these two formats back, branding and markdown, and that's all we need to get this data in our fingertips. Let's go on to the next one. For this next one, we're actually going to be using one of the built-in community nodes here from Appify to go out and scrape results from the meta ads library for our brand. And so there's a couple of different items here. I like to use the operation called run an actor and get data set. So in essence, an actor is like a mini program or mini scraping application within the Appify system that is built specifically for capturing certain data. And so this one is actually built and maintained by Appify. It's the Appify Facebook ad scraper. And what it does here, if you go to this form tab, you can do exactly what we're going to do in the automation. So you plug in the meta ads library URL, you're able to click start, and that's going to start scraping. So you can actually test what you want to do here in Appify when it comes to, structuring your request, how much data you want to get back, or any of the other kind of config form values here. So you can toggle anything you need or adjust this for your own use case. But it makes it really easy to set up and test without hitting errors in n8n before you go forward. So I do recommend you do your testing here in Appify, and then when you're ready to build your request, and send it off to the Appify API, just click on JSON here. You're going to be able to copy all of this JSON to match exactly what you configured in the form. So it makes it really easy to work with the API, and it's how I set up my Appify scrapers. So you can pull this up, paste it in, and instead of using the hard-coded URL we have here, we'll go ahead and remove that. And let's go back to our form trigger and drag in our meta ads library URL. So anytime we run this, we're going to dynamically insert the library URL that we paste in to start this full automation. So that's going to run, and we're going to see that we get a ton of information back here from the meta ads library. We don't care about all of this. There's just a couple of key parts we want to include. That's going to be some of the stuff like our original image URL, if that is an image ad. And same thing on the video ads too. If there is the original video URL provided and it is a video ad, we want to make sure we're extracting that so we can later have that in memory before we send off to the Gemini API. So in order to do that, all of the next steps we have here are going to require a little bit of data processing. First one is going to be this custom code block here, which allows us to extract the primary media item. And so what we're going to be doing is actually looking at the type of format that was given back to us from the Appify scraper. So we're going to look and see if the display format is video. We're going to do this processing here to go ahead and pull out what is the HD video URL. If it doesn't exist, we fall back to the standard URL or leave it as null. If it's an image, we're going to go ahead and look at that complicated JSON response object, look at the original image URL. We're going to fall back to the resized image URL and do null if it doesn't exist. And then finally, if it's something more complicated, like a carousel ad or a DCO type ad, we're going to look and see if we can grab the image URL or the resized URL. So pretty simple data processing. It's like, if it's an image, we're going to look at this. If it's a video, we're going to look at this field, and not too hard to set up. And I'll let you in on a little secret here. I didn't actually write this code myself. What I did was I actually went to Appify, looked at the response I got back here from one of my previous runs. And if I pull this up, we should be able to see our all field here, go to JSON. All I did was I copied this, went over to Claude, pasted that JSON in, and I told Claude to write me a code block that's able to extract this information, and gave it a few constraints on if it's an image, I want to look at this field. If it's a video, look for the video URL we need to get. And Claude was able to give me this code I was able to paste into here. So when building an automation like this, you don't even need to know how to code. You can just get the data, paste it into Claude, and it's going to come back to you with something that is able to transform that data into something more usable and easy to work with. So don't be afraid to do that if you get stuck on something when working with your automations and trying to build them out. So final thing is looking at our result output here. And that's going to be where we return the full ad object. And then we have these custom properties we extracted that are going to be used later. So the primary URL, the media type, the file extension, and the display format, all important for us to use later for further processing. The next node is going to be a simple download operation. So we're able to get to that URL that exists on the meta servers and actually load up this image inside of n8n that we can work with more easily. So we're making a simple HTTP GET request, and we're going to be using that value, the primary media URL that we transformed from earlier in our custom code block, to go ahead and download that image. So pretty simple there, but it's nice to have all 8 of our images now inside n8n for further processing. Going forward, once again, we actually fork off here into 2 separate spots. One is going to be uploading these images to a temporary file service, so we have easy access for later. Facebook, if you're doing like a long running automation, those URLs can sometimes expire and you don't want to hit any issues there. And so I'm going to use this service that guarantees that files exist for at least 60 minutes before they get deleted and I can't access them again. So it's called tempfiles.org, and you can make just a simple request here where you post to this API v1 upload URL. You don't even need to authenticate, and you're just going to be able to send your file from n8n off to the service, and then you're going to have a URL to work with later. So super useful if you need a URL for 60 minutes or less. The next one here is going to be one additional custom code block where we aggregate together all of the primary media that we were able to pull in and work with. This code is a little bit more complex here, but again, don't worry. All I did to set this up was actually take the data from the previous node, paste that into Claude, and I asked it for what I wanted. And so in this case, I had kind of 2 requirements. One was going to be I needed to aggregate together all of these 8 output items, these 8 output items into a single list. And so I need to go from 8 to 1. So that was the first requirement, was for Claude to build up an aggregate list for me of all the media files we downloaded. Number 2 was that our response, or our kind of like resulting output here, needed to include both the MIME type and the base64 encoded string of the image. So base64 encoded string sounds complicated, but it's pretty easy. All it is it's a simple string representation, our image or our video. The reason we need this is because it's how the Gemini API accepts and works with images. So instead of having to do with complicated file uploads to the Gemini API, we convert it to a string and then just push that off to the Gemini API for it to analyze and use. The third requirement here was actually avoiding duplicates. And so that's why if we look here at line 14, we're going to see we have this variable that called scene, which is kind of a checker or a collection that's checking if something already exists or not. And so if we have, duplicate ads coming back or duplicate creative coming back, there's no need for us to process all of that again. We want to keep it simple for the AI to analyze. And so we're going to check for duplicates before we return everything. After I plugged that all into Claude, I got this code snippet back, pasted it in, and if I ever hit an error, I just gave that error back to Claude and it was able to solve it for me as I continued with the rest of the process. Pretty simple to work with these custom code blocks, so don't feel like you have to shy away from them or be intimidated. They can be very powerful when you're doing these data transformations just like this inside n8n. Since I forked off, the next node I need to do here is actually merge those back in so the full execution can continue. So I just used this merge node here where I did choose branch, and I honestly am not even using the output of this. It's not super important for the rest of what we do. It's just to set up n8n so that it can execute correctly as we proceed. Let's now go on to this bottom row here, which is going to be where we take all of this context that we bundled up and start passing it off to the different APIs that we're going to work with, like Gemini to perform the audit and Gamma to actually create our presentation. So the first thing here is going to be where we build up our prompt. And once again, this is going to be something that should be tailored specific to your agency, your business, and your sales process. I have a pretty kind of generic one here set up that's going to walk through the motions of actually analyzing an ad account and passing in all that context. So we can see, our brand context. And we mentioned you're a senior creative strategist at a top tier performance marketing agency. But this is something that's not going to be one size fits all. You must include your process here for how to analyze. And that's going to be on this section where we mentioned your audit should cover. Dump in your process here so Gemini knows exactly how to follow what you would do if you were building this out manually. Very important. So that's our prompt for working with Gemini. The next one here is going to be where we actually call into the Gemini API, where we're going to take up this prompt, all of those image assets and video assets we processed from before, and start passing it off. So the main thing I have here is going to be a post request to this URL where we go into the generative language APIs. And then underneath the models, I'm going to be using this one, Gemini 3.1 Pro Preview that was just released. And then you're going to do : generate content. That's going to be the URL you need to work with this new AI model. Make sure you set up your authentication. You can go to Google AI Studio to get your API key and configure API header auth just like this. And then underneath the send body option, make sure you have this toggled on, use JSON, using JSON, and then we're going to build out an expression that sends all of this information off. So what we're going to be doing here is a simple transform once again, where we're specifying what is going to be this parts object that appears in the result here. Basically that allows us to inline pass in all of the images and videos that were scraped from the ad account and actually get them into Gemini's AI system. So you can go ahead and just copy and paste this code block. Again, you really don't need to understand it other than we're passing in our images here under the first couple of items in the parts array. And then underneath text right here, we're going to pass in the prompt we built out from before. So key parts are all the media files we scraped and downloaded, as well as this advanced creative analyst prompt that we put together in the previous node. Everything else, that's all we're doing here. So you can just copy this in. And if you do want to get this to copy in, go ahead and join our school community called AI Automation Mastery. There's going to be a link in the description of the very first comment on this YouTube video. And so click that. You're going to be able to join our community and get access to all of the n8n templates, prompts, automations we've built that powers every video on our YouTube channel. So make sure you get in. Once you find the post matching up to the video that you want to get, go ahead and download the JSON file here, and you're going to be able to import everything into your own n8n instance. All right. Coming back to the n8n automation. So we have our analysis complete. The next step up is to work with Gamma. That's going to be these two nodes here to kick off this presentation generation process. So I'll open up the build Gamma node, and we're just going to do a simple expression here that breaks down how we want to structure our presentation. Once again, I can't stress how important this is you need to tailor this to your own sales process and include your own unique insights on how you would approach actually pitching one of your prospective clients. This presentation that I've set up here is probably not going to get any sales. You need to inject your own part of the process. And so what we have set up here underneath the role section of the prompt is create a polished professional sales presentation for a performance marketing agency pitching their creative strategy services. And so we set that up. The next section is going to be the result of our audit. So we're going to look here at the result of our Gemini API response and see that we have this full audit breakdown showing everything that was included in our processing. So we can see we have our executive overview, analysis of the creative mix and formats used, how the visual designs look, looking at the messaging and copy, and going through some of the strengths, weaknesses, and even including some competitive context. Again, this was the kind of generic approach. Make sure you're including your own context. Going further, I'm going to also re-include our brand context because this is a presentation generator. We want to make the client's brand appear consistent across all these generations. And so we're going to be including all of the CoinLedger information here, like how the heading looks, what the description of the site is, what are the fonts used, what are the text sizing elements, things like that all get included here. So it's going to be very useful for the Gamma presentation maker to actually go off and generate something that's useful and is going to resonate with the prospective client. All right, so coming to this next section, we're actually going to include URLs to the images we scraped from before and uploaded to that temporary upload service, just so Gamma is going to be able to pull in the actual ad images being ran for prospective clients' meta ad library account. So if we go back to the presentation, we're going to see under the current creative analysis, these are real static ads we pulled in, and we can even pull in real video ads too. So this is something you don't have to do, but I think it does add an element of polish to this presentation to go ahead and include those real ad images. In order to inject that, we're going back to this temporary upload service. Since we have that 60-minute window, we're going to grab those URLs and insert them here into our prompt before we send it off to Gamma. And then at the end, the thing that I like to do to make the setup to look pretty is going to be this custom note here to use the OG image, which is the preview image when you share a link to any website, as the image used on the first slide of the presentation we're building. So if I come back here and scroll all the way up, we're going to see we have this nicely framed OG image, which is the preview image that gets showcased here on the presentation. So this looks great. So we have our prompt built, and now it's time to send this off to the Gamma API. So pretty simple to work with the Gamma API here. They have just a few endpoints. In this case, we're going to make a post request to this URL right here. So public API.gamma.app v1 generations. And if we scroll down here after we get authenticated, so make sure you go to the Gamma docs to figure out how to set this up It's honestly super easy. You just need to pass in an API key to the X API key header. Very easy to do. But once you have that set up and use the JSON body mode, if we pull this up, there's only going to be a few things we have to pass in here in order to generate our presentation, which is awesome. That's going to be the text mode, how we want to export it, which is going to be as a PowerPoint. And finally, what is the input text and input context we need to provide to create this presentation. So this is where we dump everything in from our prompt from before. And so we can see we have the instructions, results of the audit, everything that is useful, including the brand of CoinLedger and the image URLs all go in here. So Gamma is able to read through all that context and figure out the best way to construct an effective presentation by following our instructions. So after that runs, we're going to do the simple polling loop here where we wait a few seconds, check if the status is completed or if it's not. If it's not, we're going to loop back again. So we wait again until that generation is complete. After the completed check is actually completed, so JSON.status equal to completed, we can see that right there on the resulting side on the output. We're going to go ahead and set our result, and we're going to get back our final link for the presentation. So if I open it here, we'll see that we have that exact same presentation all loaded up with all that context we scraped from the website, from the Meta Ads account, and all of our analysis that has been reported on for how this account can improve. So there you have it. That is the bare bones system on how to set up an automation like this. Once again, make sure you're customizing this and extending it for your own liking. And lastly, if you want to get access to this full n8n automation template that I went through in this video and all the prompts I used, like prompting Gemini, like calling it into the Gamma API, be sure you click on the first link in the description of this YouTube video to join our school community called AI Automation Mastery. It's where we host everything. So all the n8n templates, all the prompts, and all of our walkthroughs on how to use n8n to automate anything. So totally free to join. Really, there's no cost. Just do it. And once you're inside, go ahead to the n8n templates tab, find the post that matches up to the title of this YouTube video. And if you click in, there's going to be this .json file. Download that, go back to n8n and click on import from file. And you're going to get this entire system in your own n8n instance. So please join. You won't regret it. That's all I got. See ya.